So, folks, pardon me. I think I just hit the wrong button there. Sorry. Let me get going here. We're gonna get the email deliverability presentation going. Okay. All right, folks. Can people
Problems?
chances of working all right?
No, I can't see anything.
Okay. Let me try this again. Sorry, as I guess I'm getting used to Bevy too.
Yeah,
I'm
the
just gonna.
learning curve continues.
The learning curve continues. I'm gonna run the risk here of just sharing my entire screen, and hopefully that might solve the problem. How are we doing now?
It won't let you do a window.
Yeah, I think I've got it going. Is it
Let me stop my video. That might be an issue as well.
Sorry, folks. We are certainly adjusting to Bevy here. Is that sharing now? It's
Yes.
telling me it is.
Yep, we're good.
Okay.
We got
Great.
it. It's perfect.
It looks good. Okay.
Yep, we're good.
Thanks for getting me through that, and everybody for bearing with us here. Okay, so we're talking about email deliverability. So this one is focused on a marketer's approach to email deliverability. So a lot of and I'm just run my introduction here with this old picture of myself. Um, Again, I'm Evan Dean. I'm a channel principal consultant. What that means is that I've got a lot of experience working with people inside of their tools. So we're talking email deliverability, and I'm going to go through some of the things that affects email deliverability. The focus you'll find of what we do as marketers in 2021 is really thinking about how we're treating our contacts and managing our reputation. So I'm going to take you through some of the basic stuff, right? Email sending tools, how that works, content filtering in emails, which is like really an older functionality that we deal with. And then we'll get into what's really the most important thing, which is reputation management. So now that I'm presenting, I can't see the chat. So what I'd actually ask, Chance, that was working pretty well where you were kind of hopping on audio there. So if there's people in the chat, would you just maybe interrupt me and grab their questions for them?
Yes, sir. I will. I've got my eyes on it. I will let you know if anything pops in there.
Okay, awesome. And like I said, everybody, definitely we got a small enough group here. Feel free to ask your questions. I'll stop at any time in the presentation, or we can wait till the end and I'll hit them up. So the first thing that we often think about when we're thinking about email deliverability is our tool that we're using and the reputation that comes with that tool. So some takeaways from that is, yes, the tool's reputation can affect you. Mostly when we're thinking about the tools we use, we're thinking about the IP sending addresses that those tools maintain and use on our behalf. Having a good sending IP can definitely affect the way that the email service providers, and I'm going to refer to them as ESPs mostly through this presentation. So the email service providers will look at the reputation of the IP that you are sending from. This is something that we don't worry too much about. Most modern, like competitive new tools have a very good reputation. So if you're using HubSpot, we usually maintain our IPs around a like 97 out of 100 reputation rating. We stay in like the high 90s for all of the shared IPs that folks sending from HubSpot use. And really, that's going to be the case for almost any other email sending platform as well. You know, they might not manage it as effectively as someone like HubSpot, who does maintain a very strict reputation. But you're probably not going to have any issues with IPs from, your MailChimps of the world or Constant Contact. Really, any of the big email sending platforms are going to have active IP management and maintain a good quality reputation for you. Some other tools that folks use when they are like managing like purchase lists and some of those more nefarious actions of the email world might not have the best IPs, but for most of us using a professional tool, IP is going to be fantastic. We're not going to worry about it. One thing that we do worry about is switching tools. When you switch tools, that switches your IP, it switches your reputation. And the reason we get concerned about that is because that is a factor that the email service providers look at in deciding our reputation. They know that people who have bad email habits and send emails that they don't necessarily want to deliver to their clients, their users, have a tendency to switch tools. So if you'd like to keep your reputation looking good and get in the inbox, you want to avoid switching tools. Find a good tool that you like and stick with it. A couple other things that we can do just to help with sending and maintaining our tool. Some of just the basic tricks, right? Or not tricks, but best practices, I should say. You want to send from a real person. And you also want to have the from name, from email address, and reply to email address be the same person. Pretty much when you're sending online, if you send it the way that you would send a normal email, even though you are sending this through an email servicing platform, an email automation platform in some cases, if you just do what you would normally do, that's going to help you with the best reputation. So make sure that you're using a real person. Ideally, it's just going to be you, your name, your email address, your reply to email address. It's fine if you're sending something from, service@yourdomain.com or even sales@yourdomain.com. But the best setup is actually going to come from a person who represents that team. So it would be better to have it come from a salesperson or a service person than the distribution email address of service or sales at your domain. One thing that you can do inside HubSpot, so my last point here is connect your email sending domain. This is something specific that you can do in HubSpot and many other email sending platforms. And for those of you on the HubSpot platform or using another email tool, I'd actually suggest that you check this because I find when I work in portals, it's often an overlooked piece of functionality. So that's connecting your email sending domain. I want to differentiate that between the email hosting domain. So when you first set up a tool like HubSpot, you connect domains to the tool that allow you to host content and HubSpot to send on your behalf. Email sending domain is something that you actually set up with your IT team and go into your email management tool, the DKIM, and give HubSpot specific permission to send on your behalf. Now, this isn't something that actually directly affects email deliverability at like a programmatic level, but what it means is that for many email service providers, it removes that little tag that you can see sometimes that says sent on behalf of or sent via. And although that doesn't filter us directly on those email sending tools, people are less likely to open an email that they see was sent on behalf of. It kind of breaks that communication and lets you know that there's a tool involved. It's not necessarily the best foot you want to put forward. So connecting your email sending domain can be very helpful. All right, so this gets into the next section. So we talked a little bit about the filtering functionality. And in general, when we're talking about email deliverability, what we're really thinking about is can we get into the inbox? And what I want to differentiate there, our goal as marketers, it's not just to deliver the email and get into the email service provider at all or that person's email account. It's actually get into the inbox as opposed to being filtered for something like the promotions tab, the social media tab, or one of the other filters like the spam tab or email that's actually just filtered on the front end. So when we're talking about email deliverability and we're talking about getting in the inbox, we really mean into their primary account inbox. So when we talk about being spammy, these are some of the older concepts that we used to use predominantly in email deliverability and what we were thinking about. These are kind of those classic things that we think about, like if our subject line has free or buy now. Image only emails have a tendency to be one of the hallmarks of folks who are sending kind of spam emails. So actually having copy in there. At the end of the day, what we're talking about here is the actual content and copy of our email and how email service providers can filter on that. I bring this up because it's something that's important for us to keep in mind, but we also need to acknowledge when we're talking about this, that it's a much simpler and at this point, fairly outdated way for email service providers to filter our content. What I mean is we don't really worry about this stuff so much anymore. This is something that you may want to avoid in general. And it's certainly something that you want to really keep top of mind when you're doing like some of your first email sends to a contact database one of your first sends as a company or one of your first sends in a long time. When you're kind of new on the block, these things can be a big effect on you. But once you do have a good reputation, having free or buy now in the subject line, using exclamation points, some of these classic things that we used to know that email service providers filtered on, they're not that important anymore. So we do worry about being spammy, but it's not the biggest deal. These are the things that I think come to us inherently. A couple other things that we can do to try to get interactions here is to limit the amount of links that we have in an email. When we're thinking about our copy, we really need to start thinking about not necessarily the copy itself, but what that does for folks to make it easy for them to interact with us. So sending just one link, we find, and the HubSpot marketing team has done a lot of research on this, in general, typically is going to provide a higher click-through rate and a higher interaction. When you send somebody something, you want to be able to say, I'm sending you specifically this because, I've thought about who you are in our relationship. And with that in mind, I'm specifically sending you this offer. I think one of our traps as marketers is we think about all the great stuff we have and we consider just sending them like a menu, like here's everything you could possibly get from us. Go ahead and grab it. Whereas we find that people are much more likely to interact with us if we're more specific and more strategic about what we send them. My spam animation goes on here. Now, the other thing that we want to talk about here, and this is really where we get into the heart of what is happening with email deliverability in 2021 and has been happening for the last few years. Your reputation. So email service providers used to use that functionality like filtering on certain words, free, exclamation points, buy now, because that was really what they had. They could see that stuff coming from an email provider, and that was what they could filter on. That was the best service they could provide to their clients. Now, email service providers work on a networked system that is much smarter and capable of providing a much better service to their clients. And what they look at is your domain. So regardless of what tool, we talked a little bit about IPs and how that changes from tool to tool. And that can kind of affect our email sending capability, our ability to get into the inbox. But the most important thing is your domain. And that's always going to be attached to you. That's your company at HubSpot.com. Whatever your domain is that you're sending from is going to continue with you. The email service providers look at who's sending these emails and how the people who get those emails interact with them. So do they regularly send to good email addresses? So what's their delivery rate? Do the folks who get those emails actually open those emails? If they open an email, do they actually click through on the content? That's really telling for them of what quality the content is. Have they replied to an email? Replying to an email is usually the goal of how we send emails. And recently, throughout 2020, that's functionality that we've been able to present to users to see if an email has been replied to, because we know the email service providers are using it regularly. Then we start to get into some of the negative attributes, right? Have they unsubscribed? Have they marked you as spam, or has that email hard bounced? These are the negative attributes. Whether it's good or positive, the email service providers are going to throttle your emails. So they're going to, although you may send to 1,000 contacts at once, they're going to send it to the first 100 contacts, and they're going to look at how people interact with that. They're also going to keep a history of your domain and how people have interacted with your emails in the past. So do your emails get open? Do they get clicked on? Do people reply to them? Or do you often send emails to contacts that hard bounce, meaning that's a bad email address? Have folks gone so far as to mark you as spam? And they're going to communicate that with the other email service providers across the network of email platforms. And if you have a good reputation, people do open and click and reply to your emails. That means that the rest of your send, as they kind of space it out over time, will be delivered to the inbox. Whereas if you have a poor reputation and you're hitting unsubscribes and hard bounces and people are marking you as spam, they're going to communicate that, and it's going to mean that future sends from your domain may be blocked or filtered. This is the most important thing happening in email deliverability right now, is managing our reputation sending quality content, sending thoughtful content, sending it to the right people at the right time, and making this work is going to be our primary driver of how we craft our strategy. And now I don't talk a lot about the actual content in emails. Some of it is important from like a filtering perspective. Keeping, a single offer in there can be really helpful for you. But mostly as an email marketer doing mass emails to a large audience, we're thinking about our relationship to that database, how we maintain it, and how we work with that to optimize our reputation online. A few things that we can do. So how to maintain that reputation. This is the most important thing for us. We can set up our right language, but at the end of the day, our reputation precedes us. The first thing that we can do to help our reputation is we don't want to block the exit, right? So we want to make it easy for them to tell us what they want. One of the biggest sins in email marketing is hiding your unsubscribe links or your email preferences. And I would even go farther as to say, you should also check on the experience of unsubscribe and adjusting your email preferences. If you've made this hard, and some of you have probably had this experience where you hit unsubscribe and and you get brought to a page where they say something like, "Are you sure? Do you just want to maybe change and downgrade a little bit to some other emails, or would you type in your email again and confirm it so we can do that?" Anytime you kind of block the exit or stay in front of the exit a little bit and make it harder, you're more likely to get reported as spam. So although, first of all, we don't want to make our unsubscribe links hidden at all. That is going to be a great way to get us hit with spam. Spam is the smoking gun of the email world, right? If you get only just a few spam marks on one of your emails, it can really hurt your reputation. On an email platform like HubSpot, you may get shut down or quarantined from sending, but that's because we are trying to protect your reputation. Getting hit with spam just a couple times can mean that your future emails do not get delivered to new contacts when you bring them into the tool. So number one thing we can do functionality wise is make sure that unsubscribe link is available. We should go check our unsubscribe links and see that experience. Make sure we're not being annoying there. And then use our email preferences. In HubSpot, we do that through email types, which allow you to filter on those subscription types. I say here that we need to use our email types as well. And what that really comes down to is whatever system you're on, we need to only be sending people the emails that they subscribe to. A classic mistake here that I think a lot of us fall into the trap of is having someone sign up for something on our site, and then we automatically subscribe them to our weekly newsletter or our monthly newsletter, our nice emails that we send out weekly, cup of coffee, here's a quick update, that kind of stuff. If someone starts getting those emails and they didn't subscribe for it, there's a very good possibility that we will then get an unsubscribe from everything from that person, because people very rarely use email preference types. And it's pretty fair for someone to be frustrated if they didn't sign up for these emails that they all of a sudden start getting. What we do when we do that is, yes, we found an opportunity to interact with someone and send them our content, but we've also really left ourselves liable for there is an opportunity for someone to unsubscribe from everything from us and avoid maybe our more significant email that they did expect that's about something for them. If they signed up for a specific bit of information or expected a conversation with sales or to get their technical question answered, but instead they start getting blog posts, they may be frustrated by that. And it's something that we're going to do at our own risk. To that point, there is functionality across almost every email platform right now. In HubSpot, you're going to see this. We call it generally gray mail, right? And this is an important concept. The idea of gray mail is something that as marketers, we've been trying to do for years and years because we understand how this affects our relationship and our reputation online. In HubSpot, you'll see this functionality when you go to select an email to send. There's an option that says, do not send to unengaged contacts. Unengaged contacts inside HubSpot it's a specific filter, and we have the ability to say sends since last engagement. So How many email sends have we sent someone since they opened or did anything with one of our emails? And in HubSpot, what that filter defaults to, which is something you can customize, but to give you a sense of what we're talking about, HubSpot set that setting at 11 email sends, and none of them have ever been opened. So as you can imagine, that's a pretty high barrier, right? If no one's ever sent your email or opened one of your emails, interacted with it, clicked on it, and you sent them 11 emails, it's pretty clear at that point that they're probably not interested in opening your emails. So what we do as marketers is we start to filter those folks. We actually will make the decision to not send them emails anymore because it hurts our reputation so much. What I recommend for folks is that you use this kind of functionality, and that may be something that you customize, maybe for your group because you're high volume, maybe higher volume, maybe lower value sales. You really pound out a lot of sales, or for whatever reason, maybe you send a lot of emails to your contacts, and that's just your relationship with them. Maybe 11 emails is actually a fairly low number for you. That is something that you can customize in the HubSpot platform. It's something that you should be able to customize across almost any platform. What I'd encourage you to do is start to play with those filters, adjust the bar up and down, and see what percentage of your contact database, the regular database that you are sending emails to, gets filtered by that kind of filter. In HubSpot, it's the disengaged contacts list. I'd encourage you to play with that and see those different thresholds. Mostly your goal should be to hit around 1/4 of your least engaged contacts. So what I mean by that is you could set a filter for if they haven't opened 10 emails and see what happens with that. And then see if you then take that database of folks that haven't opened 10 emails and then see what the halfway point is for that. Maybe you'll say, okay, out of that contact database, let's see what happens if I say they haven't opened 15 emails. And once you get down to about a half of a half, a quarter of your database, that's usually what you're going for that gray mail functionality. I want to pause here for a second because I think this is one of the most powerful tools that we have. And although I realize that we're doing like a virtual presentation here, this is often the point where I get the most pushback on using these tools. So I'm going to go ahead and assume that you folks like listening at home are kind of maybe pushing back, but haven't said it. And I'll address the questions that I get typically at this point. The concern here is if we're not sending emails to folks, how do we get business done, right? And I think that's a really important piece of pushback. I always get examples when I talk about this with different crowds of someone who got one of their best clients because they opened their 12th email they sent them, something like that. Someone who would have been in their gray mail, but actually finally interacted with an email and became a really good prospect or a client, one of their favorite people to work with. And that's important here. At the end of the day, we are sending emails, we're doing all these things. We care about our reputation because we're trying to get business done. We're trying to usually sell. With that in mind, I would suggest that you think strategically about how you use gray mail. I said that you should use gray mail as your default, and I believe that. But really what we're thinking about here is we're using this tool to not send emails to people who are they're kind of lukewarm on us, right? They haven't unsubscribed, they haven't deleted our emails, they haven't replied and said buzz off, they haven't reported us as spam. They just didn't open them. And those could be okay contacts, but they really hurt our reputation. No positive action really does add up to a lot of negative actions in the long run. So I want to suggest that you use gray mail and this functionality to suppress disengaged contacts for your emails that are very good at grinding down your reputation. So what I'm thinking about there are those weekly newsletters, the monthly newsletters, the blog subscriptions, the cup of coffee email, the product updates, all the stuff that you like to send out regularly just to have a little bit of engagement with your contacts. Those are the kind of emails that often get ignored. They're not high impact emails. I don't think any of us really kid ourselves to think that they are, but we like to send them out and engage with our audience, and that's fine. The thing is, an email that we send that regularly to an audience that disengaged can ruin our reputation. So with that in mind, I want to suggest that you use gray mail as your default for those regular kind of lower impact, let's call it what they are, emails, so that your reputation can really shine out there. You're not going to send to the people who are unlikely to engage with you, but then you got to cash in on your reputation from time to time, right? And what I would suggest that you do is when it does come time to send a specific email, with context, I'm sending you this email because you said that your close loss reason was price. Of course I wouldn't say it like that, but I'm sending to a contact database, close loss reason was price. We've got a new pricing structure. We have a more affordable service or product. Or I'm sending you this email because it's the end of summer and kids are going back to school. And I know that you are a parent or guardian of a student and we sell school supplies. All these different examples that are sending with specific context and content targeted towards the audience. Those are the emails where you probably will cash in on your reputation a little bit, turn off the gray mail. Now, that's something that we do with a little bit of hesitation because that does mean we'll be emailing those folks who were never really that into us. We're emailing a population of people at that point who are more likely to unsubscribe. So that's where it becomes incredibly important that we don't hide the exit, right? We make it easy for folks to unsubscribe. We'd rather get 10 unsubscribes than 1 spam. So from time to time, cash in your reputation, but default to not sending emails to those people who are kind of not that into you. To that point, and this is probably the closest you're ever going to get to like a tip or trick from me as far as email deliverability is concerned. But if you've been kind of paying attention to what I've been saying here, you'll understand a few things, which is that email service providers really care about your reputation. They care about the specific email you're sending to a specific group of contacts and how they interact with it. They know it's you based on your domain and your IP. And emails don't go out all at once. Like I said earlier, if you send to 10,000 contacts, email service providers are going to throttle that. It happens over the course of just like a few minutes, but it doesn't happen instantaneously. If I send to a few thousand contacts, they're going to send to a few hundred and kind of wait a bit and then say, okay, did people open that? Like, did we just send people spam? Like, did they all just mark that as spam? Because if they all mark that as spam, they're not going to send it to the remaining 9,000. They're going to shut you down real quick. That's not normally what happens with us. What's more likely to happen is we end up in this space of, oh, how many folks opened it? Because if the first 100 opened it, in that next group, there's somebody who they've never sent to before. So if that first 100 opens it, yes, I will put that in that inbox. But if that first 100 was kind of meh on it, maybe that gets throttled into spam folder. Maybe that gets throttled into a different filter, the promotions tab, some other filtering they have set up on their account. So that happens at the macro for our reputation over a long period of time, but it also happens on the micro for an individual email send. So with that in mind, if you take those factors into account, there are some things that you can do here to strategically manage your reputation within a single email send. This is a process that I might recommend to you, and you're going to have to kind of follow me on this because this gets fairly complex. This is a process that I might recommend to you if you are sending emails for the first time, maybe the first time in a long time, new business, maybe a database that hasn't been emailed in a long time. Maybe it's a new database. So you got it from, let's say a trade show or something like that. The reality of where our contacts come from is they're not always like perfect, right? We'll say that much. With that in mind, what we'd like to do is have that first set of emails that go out have the best possibility of having a good interaction so that the remainder emails that get sent out can trade on that good reputation. So we can actually kind of game that a little bit and do something strategic. So if you find yourself in that situation where this is a really important email send for you, or maybe it's a first email send of a long time, new database, what you might want to do is separate your contacts into a few groups. In this example, I've said one, in 2 or 3 groups. You might do 4 or 5, depending on how many you have. If you're sending to 20,000 contacts, it may be realistic for you to break that up into 4 groups. Regardless of how many groups you break it up into or how you do that, what you want is the first group to be the most likely group to interact with your email. So if you have a tool that's going to tell you, yes, this group opened, we're probably going to pick that. Or maybe this group opened and clicked. Or heck, I've actually made a special list of everybody who is my friends and family. And I've given them a personal heads up that I will be sending my first email for my business ever. And I've asked them to go and open my email, click on it, move me from the promotions tab into the inbox, do all the positive attributes, so that when I send to their other group that I have, which, I got from my business relationships, it's not a personal relationship. Whatever it is, whether it's based on friends and family, opens, maybe it's something less strategic than that. And it's just, these are the contacts that my sales team created most recently. These are the contacts that are from this business section and this other business section. Maybe we don't know them as well. Whatever you've got, use that to say, this little group here is my best group. They're the ones who are going to open and click on this email, most likely. You're sending the same email, right? You're going to clone that email, same copy, same subject line, same content, same name, address, same return address. But what you're going to do is you're going to send to group 1, your like star performers, give it a little bit of time so the email service providers can see that good reputation preceding you, all these opens and clicks happen. And then, about 20 minutes later, you could change that if you can see when people interact with it. But a good rule of thumb is 20 minutes later, send to the next group. And if you have bucketed them into small enough sections, what you might do is, well, first of all, you're going to be trading on your good reputation. That first group opened, the next group is going to have that same email. The email service provider is going to say, hey, this is a good email. People interact with it. You should put this in the inbox. And as you get down to your least likely to interact contacts, they have come through on the good reputation based on your first most likely to interact contacts. That's a lot of work. So it's not something that you're going to do on like every one of your email sends. You might, but I think it's something that I would definitely recommend when it's time to send like that big send or something that's like a milestone send for you. You can take all these things that we understand about email deliverability and our reputation and use that strategically for yourselves. That's going to be my last sort of tip or trick for you folks. I think I'll continue sharing if that's helpful, if we want to pull up the slides. But does anyone have any questions, anything like that?
I'm not seeing any questions, but I did just have a couple of comments to add on things that we have seen. We had you started out with the systems, right? And changing from one to another and how that hurts. So it was probably, 9 months ago now, we had a client of ours that decided that HubSpot was too expensive. So he switched out of HubSpot. I don't know what he went to. It was MailChimp, Constant Contact or something. But his email open rate, so it was really, really high. I mean, he lost like 65% of his open rate. And he's like, what happened? Well, we tried to talk you out of this for months and you insisted on it. And it really hurt him. And I unfortunately, I think there's a little too much ego involved to come back at this point, but it's very true. People take that stuff lightly. And I think it's also important to understand just the cleanliness per se of HubSpot's IP addresses and just in general, the open rates that come from this platform, right? Is it more expensive than those things? Yeah. I mean, it obviously does a million more things, but if you're heavy into email marketing, especially I look at like these e-commerce companies that are running through Shopify and things like that. I mean, it's a game changer. So it just came to mind when you said that story just immediately popped into my head. And I'm like, man, we tried to tell you this was coming and it did. It hurt bad. So, that
can hurt you. I think probably the most important thing that you can do in moving those platforms is try to bring over. I wonder about that. Like, yes, moving platforms can hurt you, and that might be what happened there.
Right.
But you also wonder if something got lost in the mix, like if they had a nice unsubscribe or a disengaged contact list, those the nice technology that we use to manage our reputation. And if maybe in the switch, they lost it, stopped using it, didn't realize that that was benefiting them.
No doubt.
I hate to see it.
I think the question, can you see the chat now? The general
Yeah.
chat? Looks
So
like
Eileen, you're asking about you're a brand new user and you want to know your score. So a few things that you might do if you're a brand new user, and I'm just gonna address your question as if you're maybe a brand new user and haven't sent emails in a little while to this database. I'm gonna say that might not be the case for you, but I'd just like to mention there is some value in email domain checking tools. Like if you've got a database and you're just really not sure at the database level if those are quality emails, that's something where you don't necessarily want to test the water on your reputation, right? And maybe you just see the benefit from cleaning up tools. There are some tools that our email deliverability team actually recommends, which I was surprised by because they're usually hesitant to make a specific recommendation. But the tool there's plenty of good ones. The one that comes up most often is Kickbox. Kickbox is a tool that integrates with HubSpot. And what it does is it pings the domains for the contacts that you're sending to. And it also checks just syntax. So, if someone gave you maybe a rude email address that it's fake email that you wouldn't have noticed, it's going to help you filter just that stuff. It'll get the low-hanging fruit and bulk of the cleanup work done for you. Now, from there, Eileen, something I think that I would definitely recommend you think about, assuming that you are a brand new user, engaging with these contacts first. Please hear my note on separating out your contact database. Ideally, you'd hit the most likely to engage first and then move through there. But at a minimum, there's just something to be said about having separate contact groups. Ideally, that will be, I'm sending to you because you're this group, this persona, or this challenge, I'm sending context email. But at the very least, just bucketing your contacts into different groups is going to help you manage that should you hit something negative. So if you hit a spam bot, which is like a trap out there for people who generate automatic emails, mostly doesn't happen to us, but sometimes it can happen. If something negative like that happens, if you have smaller contact groups, it means you can identify, that was group 2 much more effectively. It protects you a little bit. To finally answer your question though, how do you see your score? The score isn't something that we necessarily get direct access to, our reputation from the email service providers. However, we can interpret it and we can use a lot of tools to ping that. So if you're searching the HubSpot knowledge base, you'll want to use the term email health, and that'll show you under the email analysis section, that'll show you your overall email sends, open rates, click-through rates, your spam rates, and so on. And that'll give you a good sense of how HubSpot has interpreted the score over time. I think that seeing it over time is probably the most significant thing, because then you can kind of say we made some decisions back then, or we started doing what we felt was the right thing. We turned on gray mail, and you can see your reputation go up. Or if maybe you cashed in on your reputation a couple times there, you can see it go down. And I think that's what really brings it home for us. It's like, ooh, I thought maybe I was doing some bad behavior there, and it turns out I was. Alternatively, if you're a big power user and you want some tools, the tool that HubSpot email deliverability leverages, and which we actually integrate for that health score, is Auxilium. So Auxilium's a good email health score out there. So Eileen is asking again, as far as the email health score, will it show just emails sent from a single person, or is that from the organization? That's going to be every email that has been sent through the HubSpot platform. That's going to show the health score as we interpret it for your domain. Yeah. There is filtering in there if you want to look at certain campaigns or email types. Certainly that can be important for you, especially if you're trying to show hey, my team does it like this, and we've got this kind of effect. Please help us by taking on our email sending habits. But at the end of the day, it's all one domain and one reputation. So that's mostly how we do look at it. Thanks for the question.
Great stuff. I took some notes today. Kickbox, we've used a couple of tools over the years. It's not too often we have clients that are like, hey, we have this huge list and
Yeah.
let's send out. And we're like, no, no, that's a bad idea. But
Yeah,
I don't
that's
think
scary
we've used
times.
that tool specifically, but I can't tell you the last time we've had to filter out a list, but I'm definitely going to earmark that. So thank you for sharing that. And thank you, Eileen, for the question, because that gave me a tool that I'm not sure if anybody on my team is familiar with or not, if we've used it or not. It doesn't ring a bell for me. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, you might have done. That's mostly for folks like it's time to engage a brand new database. Like this is,
Right.
we got to knock the dust off this thing.
Right.
That's where you hear tools like that come in.
Yep. Makes perfect sense. Awesome. Well, hey, man, I really appreciate your time as always.
Yeah.
I hope we get to see each other again someday. It's been way too long.
I would love to come down and visit and do your hug in person. I would love come by the office and get a chance to meet with everybody.
100%. I haven't been out there I don't think I went to the last inbound.
Yeah.
I had something going on. I sent the team, but I don't think I went to the last in-person one. And then obviously nobody did anything last year. So I'm looking forward to getting back out there as well. I haven't had a good lobster roll. We don't get those around here the way you all have them out there. So I'm looking forward to getting back out there as well. So, but
yeah,
as always,
if folks are going to come to inbound, hit me up. Let me know. It's not going to be this year, but I'd love to see some people in person. Especially if we're like, hey, we talked about email at the hug.
Absolutely,
that'd always be fun.
Absolutely. Well, as always, man, I really appreciate your time. You're my favorite person that we bring on these because I take a nugget away from you every time. So I wish I could get you to do them all, but I think you have other things to do in your life. And I understand that. So thank you so much, man. It's great to see your face and keep growing that hair out. Next time I see you, it better be at least 3 inches longer.
Of course, I'll just be a full wizard, a marketing wizard next time we talk.
Awesome, Evan. Take care, buddy.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for joining and your questions and being a great audience. I'll look forward to hopefully seeing people in Zoom one day.
Absolutely. Thanks, Evan.
All right. Bye,
See ya.